You really shouldn't have to break the bank to get into medical school. I remember being told that you couldn't revise for the UCAT. Lies. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Antonia. I make videos about medicine, my experience in medical school, and I make some chatty videos as well. So if that sounds good to you, feel free to subscribe and keep watching this video. Today we're going to be talking about the UCAT. Let's get into it. Just a little disclaimer before we get into this video. Basically, the UCAT used to be called the UCAT, and when I sat the UCAT, it was called the UCAT. So I might slip in and out of calling it UCAT or UCAT, but it's the same exact test. It's just it was renamed, I believe, last year or potentially the year before to encompass the fact that it's used in other countries as well. The UCAT, or the University Clinical Aptitude Test, is an admissions test used by medical schools and dental schools in the UK and in Australia and New Zealand, I believe, just as part of your application. Not every medical school in the UK or Australia or New Zealand uses it, but majority of them do, just to see whether you'd be suited for medicine. Now, it's an aptitude test, so it tests certain skills and it's comprised of 5 sections. Verbal reasoning, which just tests your comprehension skills and basically data extraction from large pieces of text. Quantitative reasoning, which is basically just maths under pressure. Abstract reasoning, which is all about pattern recognition and being able to continue patterns. Decision making, which was brought in, I believe, for the 2018 entry, so the year after mine, but it's all about using logic to get to the end of scenarios and basically solve scenarios. And situational judgment, which is all about being given loads of scenarios and deciding what the appropriate course of action is, or what the most important course of action or thing to consider in that scenario is. If you watched my How I Got Into Medicine video, and if you haven't watched it, I'll link it up here somewhere, basically you'll know that I ended up applying for medical school twice. First time around, my UCAT score was in the 4th decile, and the second time around, my UCAT score was in the top deciles. And today I'm going to just be telling you how I started to revise for the UCAT exam and give you guys some tips I wish I had when I was preparing for the UCAT myself. So let's get into the video. First things first, make sure you've booked your test. Registration for the UCAT opened on the 1st of July, so if you haven't booked your test now, book it. It's honestly better for you to book a test date now and to move it a bit closer to the time if you don't feel prepared, or you can move it up if you feel like your revision's going really well, because up to the 24-hour mark before your test, it's free for you to reschedule your tests depending on availability and test centers. So I would just say book a test because it gives you something to work towards. In light of the global situation that we're in, the UCAT have said that you can sit your test either at home or in a UCAT test center. What I will say for that is obviously just do your test in the place where you feel like you'll be able to concentrate more. For some people, that may be in the comfort of like a study area, bedroom, dining rooms, that sort of thing. But for other people, it may be the case that, you know, you just want to go somewhere completely quiet, completely focused on you doing your test, and just do it there. That's more of a personal decision. I won't be able to tell you which one's best for you, but definitely consider the pros and cons of sitting your test at home compared to in a testing center. Now moving on into how to actually prepare for the test and how I prepared. Obviously, again, these tips are what worked for me. They may not work for everyone necessarily, but I definitely wish I had known these things before starting to prepare. The first thing I'll say on this list is give yourself some time. I remember being in year 12 and the year 13s that were running the medsoc at that time at my school told us that you didn't really need to revise for the UCAT exam, that it was just one of those things that you either get it or you don't, and I foolishly believed them. I did very minimal prep in my first time sitting the UCAT exam, and that was probably the biggest mistake I made. It is possible to revise for the UCAT exam. If it wasn't, then you wouldn't have companies trying to make resources and some of them extort students for those resources. You wouldn't be having people making resources. Even UCAT themselves have a question bank and have practice questions. So you can prepare for it. Give yourself the amount of time that you need to prepare for it. Personally for me, the second time round, I found I gave myself about a month to prepare, doing a couple of hours a day, and that really worked for me. Your revision pattern is very specific to you, but I would say give yourself about a month to prepare so you can see how you're progressing. And worst comes to worst, especially if you book your test in advance, if you're not getting to grips with the content as well as you want to, then you can just delay your exam a bit more. But definitely give yourself enough time, because that's probably one of the worst things you can do to yourself, like just rushing it and then not getting a great mark. And that leads quite nicely into my second point, which is don't overwork yourself yourself. Don't overwhelm yourself with loads and loads of study prep. The second worst thing you can do to yourself is basically saying to yourself that you're going to set your test for a month's time and that you're going to do 12 hours of revision every single day for this exam. You're going to burn out. You're going to overwork yourself, and it's probably going to hinder your score more than it's going to help your score. When revising for the UCAT exam, there definitely is a point where you just feel a bit burnt out and tired. As you start doing more practice questions, doing more practice papers, you'll start to see that, you know, very repetitive themes come up, which is good because it means that you're kind of getting to grips with it. But at the same time, if you're doing 12 hours a day for a month of revision for any exam, you're going to get burnt out, and the UCAT is no different. How I did it, I revised for about an hour to 2 hours every single day in the weeks leading up to it. I've thrown some practice exams there as well, and as I got closer to the time, I would slowly increase my revision schedule. So instead of doing maybe 1 or 2 hours, maybe I'll do 3 or 4 hours about 2 weeks leading up to the exam. But again, I did it specifically based on what works for me and how I know that I revise best. I would just say that it's best to start slow and steady, because then you give yourself a chance to actually really understand what you're going through without having to worry about burning yourself out. I would suggest making a revision timetable for yourself, so you can set yourself to do verbal reasoning one day, abstract reasoning the next day, situational judgment questions the next day. By doing that, you'll be able to accurately track which sections you're doing really well in and which sections that you need a bit more help with. It allows you to be able to tailor your UCAT prep a bit better. The next thing on my list is to choose your resources wisely and to make use of free resources. I have been scrolling through Med Twitter and like Med Instagram for the last couple of weeks to a month-ish, and a lot of people have started to call out the fact that lots of companies really do extort people out of their money so that they can have access to resources that are supposed to kind of guarantee them a good score. You shouldn't have to break the bank to get into medical school. Life is expensive as it is. The UCAT exam is minimum, I think, £65, and it even goes up to £100 depending on when you sit, and the costs keep on coming in. UCAS costs money, getting to interviews costs money, medical school costs money. I think it's really, really important for people to not break the bank to go to medical school. I would definitely use free resources and actually actively look for free resources. The UCAT website now have a question bank that you can do, which questions from all 5 sections of the UCAT, as well as I think 2 or 3 practice exams. And I would really suggest to people to look on the internet as well. Look on Instagram, Twitter, just do a Google search for free UCAT resources, or at least resources that are reasonably priced. I understand why people and companies will charge for these services, but sometimes when you're scrolling through and you look at what people are asking for in return for reading personal statements or a couple of questions here and there, it just seems very exploitative, and I just don't think that's how we should be in this community. Like, we should be trying to help as many people as possible. So on my channel, I have promoted Medify before, and I honestly think that Medify really changed the game with my UCAT preparation, but I would never ever suggest a resource to anybody that I don't think is good value for money, that I have neither tried myself or at least scrutinized myself to see whether it is actually worth its money, as I used it and I think that it really helped me boost my score from the 4th decile to the top decile. But I would definitely say use and exhaust all the free resources that you can find before you go to any kind of paid resource. At the end of the day, paying loads and loads of money isn't going to guarantee you a good UCAT score. It's more about your grasp on the 5 different sections and the kind of questions that you get on the day as well, because it is random. Like, not everybody in the country is going to get the same UCAT questions. Make use of the free resources and then do your research yourself and decide if you want to go for any paid resources. I used Medify. I really liked Medify. I think that it helped, but it may be different for other people. Other people may prefer to use other paid resources, or some people may not actually want to pay for resources full stop, which is absolutely fine. If your sixth form has a MedSoc or has any kind of Med alumni as well who have left any resources, I know that I gave some UCAT resources back to my school, and so did other medics in my year after we left to go to uni. Then it's also a good idea to see whether you can borrow any books or resources that have been left. But yeah, you shouldn't have to pay loads and loads of money to be able to get into medical school. And finally, pick medical students' brains. Honestly, this is a really important one, I'd say, not just to get you into medical school, but just for your career in medical school as well. The best people to ask about any kind of examination, any kind of process, are the people who have just gotten through it and have passed. So I would really recommend asking any medical students you know who have sat the UCAT exam recently, not recently, who knows. Obviously the more recent, the more likely they are to be able to help you. But even if you ask somebody who's just about to graduate medical school, they most likely sat the UCAT exam and they can give you some pointers and some tips and maybe point you in the right direction of good resources to use as well. This one can be a bit of a difficult one, especially if you don't know any medical students personally, but in that case I'd really say to take to Twitter or Instagram. I've seen so many nice people on Twitter and Instagram who are just willing to answer people's questions. I'll put my medic Insta here so that you guys can see like my handle and everything. I am more than happy for you guys to send me a DM if you want some tips or anything like that. Obviously I sat my UCAT a couple of years back now, but still I may be able to give you some points and things. Medical students are definitely a fantastic resource for helping you get into medical school. They've done it before, they've gone through the whole process, and more often than not medical students are more than happy just to answer questions and to point people in the right direction. So definitely try and pick a medical student's brains for how they revised for the UCAT, even wider, how they chose which universities to apply to, how they did in interviews, personal statement tips, all of it. And that brings me to the end of this video. I hope it's been helpful. If you want me to go further into detail about each subsection, or you want me to talk about my experience on the day or anything like that, then feel free to leave a comment. If you have any other video requests, feel free to leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.